Soil is composed of four major parts: mineral matter, water, air, and organic matter. The mineral matter is going to make up 45% of the soil, whereas air and water each will contribute 25%, which is quite a bit from what we think of soil, and then organic matter makes up the last 5%. If we just look at the mineral matter then and break it up into its components, the particles that can make up the soil would be sand, silt, and clay. Sand would make it feel gritty, and these would be the larger particles. Silt would be in between, and that's usually pretty soft or smooth. And then clay is going to feel sticky, and it's going to be the tiniest particles. These are the tiniest particles. And so water can't pass through clay like it can through sand. Silt, sand, and clay all mixed all together evenly, the same amounts of each, is what we call loam. And loam is resistant to erosion due to its cloddy condition. So loam is a mixture of all three of these particles in the soil. When we talk about water and air in the soil, if there are pockets of air in the soil, that will give places for the water to travel through the soil. If there is no air in the soil, that also hurts the roots. Roots need oxygen in order to grow. Plants do the process of respiration. Even though we know plants make their own food through photosynthesis, they also have to metabolize that food that they make when they need energy. So they do need oxygen, and sometimes we forget about that. And it takes about 32 passes with a vehicle over a piece of land for it to compact the soil so much that nothing can grow there except for weeds, really hardy plants. So 32 passes. When you're driving on your yard or driving on your farmland, you want to make sure that you rotate that ways of how you drive on that soil. So air is important. Now, if the air is gone, there's going to be no pockets of air, no space for water to infiltrate as well. And so that contributes to the process of no plants being able to grow there, no roots being able to survive. So air and water are important. We have organisms in the soil that are going to, like worms, that can pass through the soil and create those air pockets. Plants, the roots themselves will create air pockets if they can get in there and grow. Now, the last part of soil is organic matter. That is the dead or decaying things that used to be living. And organic matter is important. It's what makes your soil really black and fertile. And organic matter comes from when you leave material on your land and you let it decompose. Now, there's three parts of soil when we talk about the chemical properties of soil, and those would be soil fertility, salinity, and soil pH. Fertility would be what kind of nutrients are in the soil, and the nutrients that we're usually talking about are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the main ones. Although there are other micronutrients, these are your macronutrients. These are the ones that are mainly needed for plants to grow. Micronutrients would be those that you need in smaller amounts. But soil fertility is linked to the organic matter that is in the soil. And so organic matter is what's going to bring in some of that nitrogen and the phosphorus and the potassium. So that's what soil fertility is. How well will things grow in it? Soil salinity would be what kind of salts are in it. And usually you can see these soils. When the water evaporates, salts will be left behind, and you'll see this white powdery substance left behind on that soil. Saline soils obviously aren't good for some plants to grow in. And so you have to do a balancing of that. So they keep a track of that. Some of the potholes, they'll have freshwater streams coming in, so you always have water coming in, and then the water is always evaporating. Well, you're always going to be leaving behind all those salts, and they're going to be built up. Saline will also come from water that goes deep into the soil, and then when it transpires out of the soil or out of the plants, some of these salts will be brought up from lower in the soil and then they'll be brought up to the top. Then there's always the leaching of minerals and nutrients. Leaching means they'll dissolve in the water and transfer through and go down. So you do have some that are being brought up from the evaporating of the water from the soil. You have some nutrients being leached down as it rains and they go down. Now, soil pH is, if you remember the pH scale, 0 to 14, 7 is neutral, above 7 are bases, and below are acids. So the pH of soil, you'll have acids and bases. We test this by putting some hydrochloric acid on the soil. No, we don't test it that way. We don't test it that way. That's going to be testing for something different, and I'll get to that. But we test this with pH paper. So you would have the soil, you put it in some liquid, and the water dissolves whatever the chemicals are in the soil, and then you'll look at the color change, and then you'll compare that color change to a chart. That chart will say it's basic or it's acid. What kind of things make soil acidic would be your acid rain, which would be from maybe different fertilizers might be more acidic than others. Basic soils, depending on what kind of chemicals you're putting down, how much saline, how many salts are left behind. Acidic soils, I think pine tree needles, so under a pine tree, I think it gets kind of acidic under there because the pine tree needles are more acidic. We might want to look that up. So that's a key thing. You guys can type that into the Safari and just double check. Under pine trees, is it more acidic or more basic? Just to double check. Soil biology. Biology means living things. So what are the living things that are in the soil that make the soil a fertile or more functional soil? Biology, there are organisms in there. You have insects, you have worms. Okay, so insects and worms. All of these organisms are necessary. These are the things that are going to eat and decompose the organic matter and put it back into the soil. So without these, you aren't going to break down that organic matter. Also, you would have fungus in the soil and bacteria. Excuse my handwriting, it's not that good, but you know what I'm saying. Fungus and bacteria. These are also going to be decomposers, but these do as well. Insects and worms are also going to create those air pockets from their movement through the soil. So they're very important. Another aspect that they're finding with these living organisms in the soil is that when they are decomposing, they create a glue-like substance that actually holds the soil together. And this is found when people overwork their land. So if they're tilling their land up a lot, if they overdo that, they are killing organisms or breaking up that organism's habitat, and this glue-like substance is no longer viable for that soil. And if you take a clod from a low-till or no-till soil and you take a clod from someone who really works their soil and you put it in water, the clod is going to hold its form a lot better. That clod of soil from the tilled up land is just going to crumble and soak up that water and just be mushy. Now, the significance in that is that in the spring when it rains, you want it to rain, but you want your soil to be holding that moisture, not letting it break it down and make it so it's so mushy. Otherwise, you can't get in and plant your fields. So holding that water that holds that soil together, holding that water and that soil being able to maintain its shape and function is good for farmers because you can get into your fields and plant while that moisture is there. If the soil breaks down and is just mushy, you aren't going to be able to plant your crop because you won't be able to drive on that land. And then if you're driving on that mushy land, you are going to be compacting that soil a lot more than if you didn't till it at all, or you did the no-till or low-till, and that soil has more structure to withstand compaction, or resist compaction, I should say. Okay, we're not going to become tree huggers here, but we also have to realize and admit the consequences of our actions, and that way we can answer the question and solve it. So, best management practices to prevent erosion. Erosion is the movement of soil, so that's when it's going from one place to another. Now, farmers, we want to prevent this because we want to keep our soil on our land. So, this isn't where we get all, environmental and we forget about our needs and our uses for the land. But we also incorporate our knowledge of how to prevent it so that we can keep it for our profits. So the four main causes in the world of erosion, obviously is ag. A lot of the world is ag. Logging, mining, and construction. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't other causes of erosion, but these are four of the main ones. Now, to prevent erosion, we have in the ag world done the low-till, no-till. Logging is they've cut down specific trees instead of doing clear cutting. Mining, they've gotten away from doing big open mines where they don't keep some of the soil. And mining, they also have to reclaim the land, so reclamation, which means putting it back to the way it was, so reclamation laws. Construction. Anytime there's a construction site, you'll see lots of erosion prevention, and if they don't, they're only making it harder for them to work there and do their construction. So preventing erosion is important. If we don't prevent erosion, then we get some issues with that soil going places. And one of the places it likes to go is water, because when it rains, soil transported by water is going to find the lowest point in that area, and that would be any bodies of water. That it will always flow down to the lowest body of water. So one of the things that happens is you get all these nutrients in the water. So excess nutrients in water is going to cause problems because those are going to cause algal blooms. Now, algal blooms are going to then die off once they use up the nutrients, and once they die off, the decay of algae is what will lower the oxygen level, lowers oxygen levels. So even though algae is going to produce oxygen, it's going to produce oxygen that's going to go into the atmosphere, but it's also, when it decays, going to use up all of the oxygen in that water in the decay process. So then you get that stinky water, and then it's no good for fish or any other plants or animals. So excess nutrients can cause what we call an algal bloom or algae blooms. Another problem with erosion is toxic substances going to the water. Now, we know this about Flint, Michigan going on right now. Flint, Michigan has all of their water problems. All of that industry had water flowing from those industries and going into their drinking water system. Not a good idea. The third thing that gets into the water or is bad in the water is the bacteria. Once this algae is decaying, that decay is going to create large amounts of bacteria, bacteria being the main decomposer of soils. So we need to keep track of all of that information. So in the erosion factor here, of course, there's going to be an equation that we can determine how much soil loss we would predict in an area based on certain factors. One of those factors would be water erosion. So they can figure in how much water erosion, and that's going to be determined by the rainfall. Obviously, if the rain is going to be coming down hard and fast and a lot, we're going to have more erosion. Soil erodibility. So the soil and how erodible it is, erodibility, if it is not held, if you till up your land and you have it exposed, it's going to erode worse than someone who leaves that land with some cover crop on it. Topography, if I can spell right, topography. Topography is going to be the slope of the land, and obviously if you're on a hill, that soil is going to erode down a lot easier than if the land was flat. Management factor. This is how smart are you with your land? What do you do with your land? Do you rotate your crops? Do you take care? Do you, when you plant, do you plant with the contour of the land? And then erosion control practices. Do you do no-till, low-till? So all of these factors are put into this equation, and you solve for what you predict how much erosion will be in that area. And the new equation is RUSLE. Rainfall, I'm not sure what all the letters stand for, to be honest with you. So universal soil loss equation, and I'm not sure what the R stands for, but they just changed it to being RUSLE. If you've ever looked at the soil profile, so we're looking at a profile of soil, you would see that the very top layer is going to be where plants are going to grow. So those are my plants up there. That would be your topsoil, also known as the A horizon. So the A horizon. Then the next part would be your subsoil, and that would be your B horizon. Parent material, C horizon, and then your bedrock would be like it is, your bedrock, where that parent material is just going to be coming from. When working with the soils, always refer to the soil survey book for different soil profile information. Okay, some of you might think, who cares? It's just soil, it's just dirt. Well, who cares? Well, value of soil. Obviously, farmers value their soil a lot. It's their moneymaker. So it is what we make our food with and our crops. It is a strong base of our economy, especially in this area, right? So it's the growth of our food. It's a big, strong part of our economy and the agricultural economy. Good social benefits of good soil stewardship, such as cleaner water, cleaner air, desirable wildlife populations, and adequate recreation opportunities. If we keep our soil good, it will also keep our water good. Animals want to live here, which then is hunting, fishing, all of those kinds of things. If we keep our soil where it's supposed to be, our water will be cleaner, our air will be cleaner. It just is an all around, when you keep one thing good, you have a habit of keeping all of the other things good. And then if your soil looks good, there's what we call an aesthetic attribute, which means, oh, it just looks nice. It looks nice for everybody around you. The landscape is pretty. Things grow well, and it looks nice. So aesthetic, if I spelled that right, I forgot a T-I-C. Sorry, aesthetic, E-T-I-C. So aesthetic attributes. The landscape is pretty. Wildlife has resources to use for it. So when we talk about value, and they ask you these questions on the Envirothon test, and sometimes we just don't, we know the value of it, but how do you put it into words? So that's how you do that. Economically, it's important to us. It's important for everybody in the world because we need to grow our food. And then just that growing of food is an economic value to us in our area. Animals need good soil, good crops, good farming. If we keep our soil from eroding away, that'll keep our water resources good. And also water resources from the land having plants around it, and those animals can live there. And then aesthetic attributes are just how pretty something looks. And if you go somewhere and things grow nicely in that soil, and the soil is good enough to grow things, it gives you a nice landscape. So when you answer those questions, those essay questions, you'll want to use a lot of words like I just did. All right, back to soil erosion. Water-caused soil erosion has 4 different ways that it can happen. Sheet erosion is the removal of the soil layer that's fairly uniform thickness by runoff water. So if you think of it, a whole sheet of it goes away. You have a big landslide with water just washing it away. Rill now is where you make a small channel, and then when the small channel, so this is a channel, and it's small, when the channel gets bigger, then we call it a gully. And I know you have seen these before, but these would be your channels, channel erosion, and this would just be the big channel. Rills would be little, gullies are big. Sheet would be large masses, large quantities, and large surface area going away. Now, stream bank erosion is where the stream widens. And some people who live along streams and rivers want to keep that stream from widening. So they'll put what we call riprap. I had to think of it there for a second. Riprap, R-I-P-R-A-P. Riprap is going to be rocks along the edges, or they're going to put walls along the edges, so retaining walls. That's what we call riprap. When the water hits the rock instead of the soil, it keeps the soil from eroding away off the banks of the river. There are approximately 250 different soils in North Dakota, and these have all been mapped, and every soil survey book has those in them. They classify soil based on the suitability they have for crops. There's class 1 through 8. Class 1, very little land in North Dakota qualifies for classification 1, so it is not used here. So we'll get into what that is. Class 2 land in North Dakota, if it's cultivated, so class 2, if it's cultivated, is the type of soil where preventing erosion is relatively easy. So this would be easily preventable from erosion. They're good crop producers. Class 3, soils can be good crop producers too, but erosion is usually a little more difficult to control. So 2, erosion control possible, and good crop. Good crop, but a little bit more erosion. Difficulties in controlling erosion can be due to the sandiness or the hilliness of the slope for group 3. Then we get to class 4 soils. These would be your cultivated, may be cultivated for crop production with some degree of safety, but they require a lot more care and the application of more conservation practices than the class 3. So class 4, we're getting even harder to maintain their quality. So harder to prevent erosion, harder to keep them producing good crops. Soils in land classes 5, 6, 7, and 8 are generally unsuitable for cultivation. Class 5 soils are wet and make up the bulk of North Dakota's prime wetlands. So these would be your wetland soils. 6 and 7 are sandy, steep, or have shallow topsoil. So 6 and 7 are going to be sandy, steep, and have shallow topsoil. So they're not good for cultivation. Class 8 are usually very steep or barren and harsh. So these would be your worst soils. So class 1, and then moving through that. Class 1 must be the best soil ever in the world, huh? Care should be exercised in using this system because wet soils and land classes 4 and 5 are quite often placed in land classes 2 and 3 if they can be easily drained. So if you can drain these, they could be classified up there. So keep in mind. Okay, conservation practices. So what do farmers do? What do people do in order to keep their soil where it's supposed to be and keep it, keep the money where it's supposed to be? Strip cropping. A lot of farmers will do strip cropping or planting with the contour of land so it doesn't just flow down the hills. Minimum tillage, leaving some of the crop on the land so that those roots will hold that soil in place. No-till is just the next step up from minimum tillage. Wind breaks keep wind from blowing the soil away. So wind breaks helps to break the wind so wind doesn't blow the soil away. Then when we talk in terms of water, obviously tillage, no-till, and strip cropping are going to keep water erosion down, but they also will use sod waterways. So they'll put sod down for these waterways, and then they also have water diversion, so water doesn't flow in the high erodible areas. Some of the tests you'll have to do with soil. You'll have to soil texture, and that's where we made the ball, got it wet and made the ball in our hand, and then you made the ribbon, so sometimes called the ribbon test, and see how far it breaks, how long it goes till it breaks, and then you follow the chart, follow the arrows down the chart and where it leads you, and it will tell you those different things. Soil survey book. We need to get familiar with the soil survey book the more you read through it, so I suggest that you grab one of those and just read through it at night or during the day during study halls. Soil triangle. I'll upload a soil triangle, and then I will show you how to use the soil triangle. And then there's the Munsell's Soil Survey book that I'm going to also do one more PowerPoint, or one more slide on. Okay, so I hope this will show up on the PowerPoint. We'll see. Soil texture triangles depend on the composition and relative portions of clay, sand, and silt. In sedimentology, clay is defined as particles of earth between 1 micrometer to 3.9 micrometers in diameter. So the same thing, you can look at here what silt is defined as. You can look at these different things and pick a color you can see. Silt, and then what sand is, all those sizes. So the USDA classifies soil types according to a soil texture triangle chart, which gives names to various combinations of the clay, salt, and silt. And here would be such a soil triangle. So learning how to use it. Look at the orientation of the percentages on the sides of the triangle. The numbers are arranged symmetrically around the perimeter. On the left, the numbers correspond to the percentage of clay, and on the right, the numbers correspond to the percentage of silt. At the bottom of the triangle are the percentages of sand. So you can see these different things, clay, silt, and sand here. So it's clay, silt, and sand, and then the percentages that correspond to it. So here is an example. Classify a soil sample that has 30% clay, 15% silt, and 55% sand. Locate 30% clay on the clay axis. So here's my 30% clay on the clay axis. Draw a line horizontally from left to right. Okay, so here we're following this line over here. Next, locate 15% on the silt axis. And so 10 to 20 here between. Here's my 15. And draw a line going down, following that, and then locate 55% on the sand axis and draw a line going up diagonally to the left, and you can find where that belongs. So applying this, we brought that 15 down, the 30 over, and here's my 55, and then we brought them up and where they correspond. So this would be sandy clay loam. So it would be in this category here. Oh. And so you get this area right here. Let's get rid of all those, I guess. Right here it would be sandy clay loam. So you can practice these right here. You can go to this website up here if you want to, practice more of those, or just Google soil triangles and you can get more examples. Okay, like I was saying, 10YR, it seems like the right page for most North Dakota soils. But looking on this website, nrcsUSDA.gov, you can get a little bit more information. You need to be able to use that book, or at least those pages. It tells you what mineral content is in the soil. Also in this book, it talks about effervescence. So if you add hydrochloric acid to soil, if it fizzes, that's called effervescence. And that is the test for the calcium in the soil, the calcium carbonates in the soil. So be able to find that page. You just go to the index and you can find that page. So here is some of the basics, the mineral that would be in it, and that would be the color. And this is just a basic chart on that. If you have water going into the soil, you get a mottled look or a grayish color to it. That also is anaerobic environments here, and you can pause the slide and read this document, and that would be a great thing for you to do in terms of gaining information from this here. I don't want to read it to you, but I'm providing it here. Organic matter. So that is, right here. Just pause and read that page there. Now, if you look at this soil profile, you have the O up here at the very top, and then your A, and then your B, C. So just be aware that there sometimes are different horizon points to, or, calling them. Let's see, soil formation and classification. What creates soil? Climate, whatever material, of course, parent material, the climate, topography, which is how the land is structured, what kind of plants and animals are there, and then obviously time. And there are different soil orders, just like there are animal orders. Everything has a kingdom, phylum, class order. Well, soils are also put in different orders. And here's the different orders. And I'm not sure what we have in our area, but you could look it up in the soil survey book. I just went into this NRCS website on soils and going through some of the different things on soil horizons, because I know at the contest you'll have to measure the horizons in a cutout slab of soil. And the O horizon is, below the O horizon is the A horizon. And in here we get a definition of what the O horizon is the organic matter that is present there. And so the A horizon, the O horizon is below it is the A. Root activity, this horizon is where most root activity and generally is the most productive layer of soil. The A horizon at these leaving a concentration of silicon sand, so has been buried beneath. So you can kind of see how they've broken these different horizons up. Looking at different examples that they have in this website might give you an idea of what you're looking at there. If the soil isn't well drained, that's where you get those modeled things. I'm trying to find an example of that. And there's a name for it. And if you look here, we have some things with rainfall causes leaching, and rain dissolves the minerals such as the carbonates and transports them deeper into the soil. Some acid soils formed in the parent material contain limestone, and so leaching of minerals means they dissolve in the water and go deeper into the soil. Now the same thing can happen as water evaporates. They can, as water comes up and evaporates off the top of the soil, it will pull water from down below. And sometimes it will transport minerals up, and so you'll get these deposits of minerals as it evaporates away as well. So here is an example of the 10YR page, and they have this sample of the two soils here, and you would put them in these charts as where they would belong as far as the color goes. So you'd have 10YR, 7-7/ or whatever the number here is, and then this chroma at the bottom. And so that's how you would figure on those, and you can obviously pull this document up in the internet and look a little bit in there. So not only is this important information just for this contest, but reading through this information would be very helpful for those of you that are farmers or are going to be farmers, or plan to go into agriculture of some kind. Even if you're going to sell fertilizer, knowing about the soil is going to help you with your fertilizers or pesticides and herbicides or selling of the stuff. So you can, sell the information, sell the stuff that you're going to sell. Salinity here, we were talking about that earlier. Salts, mainly sodium, but magnesium, calcium, and chlorides, all of those are going to be considered your salts. And if you keep going through this page here, soil texture, here they show the sand being the biggest, then silt being that size, and clay being that size in comparison to each other. And what happens when you have the erodibility and evidence of erosion on sandy soil partially, protected. So if you just set those rocks there, everything eroded around it and left that soil underneath it. So there's some really cool pictures and some information here. Soil productivity versus irrigation and drainage. What happens, soil properties, versus the different types of soils. Obviously, you want to know a little bit about stuff. You want to be able to find stuff. Here are those classes of soil that I had talked about earlier. Here's a picture of that. So it kind of gives you class 1, class 2, class 3, 4, and then your 5, 6, 7, and 8, are non-farmable. This website is got a tremendous amount of information. I hope that you guys, further check up into this. I'm kind of going through it quickly because I think all of you are able to study on your own. But here is how the townships are set up: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they roll around like that. There are also soil survey. The soil survey is also online now. So the web soil survey application to assist, there is information you can go on to the NRCS and link to the soil survey that's online. And it will walk you through, and it's just a very interesting way to know more about the soils in your area. And they'll give you some lessons on how to, you have your longitude and latitude, and identifying things according to the soil survey book and how to use the soil survey. Okay, this is my last slide. I'm just going to put on this slide Envirothon. You can Google Envirothon and you can find North Dakota Envirothon, and you can go to, there should be a resources page, and there's lots of links. I suggest to prepare for the Envirothon that you start doing some self-study. If you want to study with me, just let me know. We'll make arrangements, and we will certainly get you filled up with information. At some point along the trail with soils, they're going to have you use this Munzel color system, and it's the Munzel Soil Color System book. They're like $1,000 book. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they're pretty expensive. They don't even borrow them out very often from the NRCS. So the Munzel color system, the soils are going to have a red, brown, yellow, yellowish red. If you look, I'm reading right there. And what the book does is it helps you identify hue, value, and chroma. And if you look 10 YR 5-3, with a soil color book with Munzel's notations, a science student or teacher can visually connect soil colors with natural environments of the area, and students can learn to read and record the color scientifically. Soil color by Munzel notation is one of the many standard methods used to describe soils for soil survey. Munzel color notations can be used to define an archaeological site or make comparisons in a criminal investigation.